Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Good evening, and I would like to salute our viewers on Al Jazeera Mubashir, which is organizing this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, I am honored. I am Ahmed Taha. I am honored to moderate this session, which is under the title "Why Think Tanks Matter: The Role of Think Tanks in Times of Crisis." Ladies and gentlemen, you definitely know better than me that think tanks at these present times have become something that everybody looks forward to and listens to. Some even say that think tanks are providing decision makers all over the world with all the analysis and presentations about political, economic, important issues at the time that there are so many political crises and economic challenges in our region and the MENA in general. In fact, this seminar today comes as one of the series of seminars organized by Brookings Doha Center with Al Jazeera Mubashir channel to talk about think tanks. And this evening we're going to answer or to pose many questions looking for their answers. The first question is, how can think tanks change their roles at the times of crises, especially that there are so many of them in our Arab region and in Middle East in general, and how can their intellectual production could reach the masses at the time there are so many channels of communication and social media sites and of course the conventional media also. And if there's also an important question, that is how these think tanks can deliver their research and analysis in an effective way to the people and the public in general and to the decision makers in the political arena. So now we have our guests with us, but before introducing the guests and the panelists, I would like to say that we on this day are going to get acquainted with what is called the annual report, that is in which a number of think tanks cooperate to publish it in cooperation with the Jazeera Center and Civil Socials in Pennsylvania University, in which there are about 30 criteria. And every year this center gives analysis about the different think tanks in the world and their classifications. So let's have an idea about this classification made by Pennsylvania about think tanks in the world, and what is the position of Brookings Center and the Al Jazeera Center for Studies, who will be speaking about I will give the floor to Mr. Mohammed Mukhtar to give you an idea about this. Ladies and gentlemen, assalamu alaikum. You are all welcome here, dear guests. This is one of the partnerships that we are very happy about. We at the Center of the Center for Studies in the Jazeera, along with the Brookings Centers, with whom we are happy and proud to be cooperating. And we first of all also thank our colleagues in Jazeera Mubashir for transmitting this meeting that comes at a time with the results of the publication of the annual report of Pennsylvania University about the classification of different think tanks. But this is important because it is a good occasion to remind ourselves about the roles played by the think tanks in the world and their importance for decision makers and for the political and the intellectual situation in any country. These think tanks are very important and help the decision makers, and the more they are in contact with the public, the more they are useful, and this is what we want in our Center of for Studies at Al Jazeera, along with other centers headed by Ibn Khaldun Center. All these centers and think tanks want to revive their role in the different activities, to speak, to describe the environment we live in and how we can understand the events around us. And at Al Jazeera Center for Study, we thank you for presence, and with the Doha Brookings, we were fourth position last year, and we are all here in Doha, and we are in a very good position, and we are gaining and progressing at the Doha Center. This is for the second consecutive year that Al Jazeera Center is the only Arabic center that has were included in the integrity criteria, and we have made 2 points of advance, and we hope that we will find some serious Arab think tanks and that we'll have a lot of competitivity with them. It's not important what position we are in, but to expand our knowledge and the knowledge of all those who are public. I thank you very much, and I thank this important thinking session. Thank you, and I thank the public. ايش هذا المتحدث هذا؟ هذا مدير المركز. هذا مدير. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to introduce our guests who will be our panelists and who will be answering the questions that were raised. And I begin with Dr. Nader Qabbani, Director of Research in Brookings Doha Center. Welcome, sir. And I also welcome Dr. Mohammed Sharqawi, a senior researcher at Al Jazeera Center for Study. Welcome, Dr. Sharqawi. And also welcome Mr. Naif bin Nahar al-Shimmari, Director of Ibn Khaldun Center for Humanities and Social Sciences, Qatar University. I welcome you all with full respect. First of all, I would like to I will show you how we're going to work. First of all, I raise a question to the panelists, and each one of them will have 5 minutes to reply to the question, and then we will give the floor to you, the audience, to raise your questions, and we begin with Dr. Nader. How the think tanks, how can they modify or change their roles at times of crises? In the name of God, the most merciful, the most compassionate, may God pray and pray the Prophet Muhammad. Good evening. I will begin by extending my thanks for Al Jazeera Center for Studies for organizing this joint activity which brings us together with the public to discuss this issue of the importance of think tanks. And I would like to congratulate Al Jazeera Center for Studies for the position they have obtained in the Middle East and the North Africa. I think they are the 4th position, which is and the first #1 on the level of Gulf states. So I congratulate them and wish them all success and continuous progress. As for the question, the think tanks have played a very important role in searching for information and for delivering this, communicating this information to decision makers. So the beginning is the analysis and then the delivery of the information, and this of course requires a sort of infrastructure. There must be some capabilities for analyzing the different policies, whether social, political, economic, and this information must be analyzed in a very adequate way and a lot of transparency in order so that decision makers can get to have something that they can use or can be beneficial for them. At the end of the day, we think there is something wrong. There is a shortcoming or something wrong in the work of think tanks. We do the analysis and publish our reports, and we give summaries about the different policies, and we undertake this role in a very good way. And also we play a role of being a bridge between the academic area who are only focusing on researches and the decision makers in a way that we convey this information to the decision makers in a useful way. But there is a link of communication between the think tanks, non-academic ones. With academics, the gap is even bigger. The think tanks and the delivery of information that's useful but to the decision makers, and this is very important. So it is important to be scientific and to have the good material, but the think tanks must be based on a scientific way of analysis, but it should be useful. Being useful is something difficult. We as think tanks, sometimes we have an information, but we don't analyze it in a way that will help the decision makers to think how can they improve this information and use it for their process of decision making. During crisis times, there is no time. Time is short, and consequently, during crises, the information should be quick, fast, and useful, and applicable in a good way. And that's why you find there is some shortcoming in this aspect in the decision-making process. Sometimes, and many times, in fact, the information that is being researched, that is being analyzed, are very important, but they might not be the basic thing, an important thing during the crisis period. So the think tank should keep this in mind to change their work and to be faster. Many of these centers cannot change their way of work, or they have annual programs and agendas, but they must be flexible enough to change their priorities in dealing with the different aspects that come up. And they must also have a very good relationship with the decision makers before the crisis. During the crisis, decision maker and the politicians don't have the time to build such relationship. So the relationship should be existing before the crisis. And finally, I think that the think tanks and the researchers in these think tanks should get used to that. We usually present the information, send the information, but we do not think about how this should be applied or put into implementation and their political implications. This is something that you should think of before the crisis. So you took your 5 minutes, and now we give the floor to Dr. Sharqawi. Dr. Nader said that during the crisis period, the think tanks should change their priorities to be able to cope with the events. And now, in January, this month, we have seen so many events that are more than one can see in 1 year. How can this be activated? How could this think tanks be going hand to hand with the events, with the developing situation, and knowing that they can face all these challenges during the crisis?
First of all, I would like to congratulate my colleagues at Jazeera Center for Studies and the BDC for what I consider as an advancement that has been in a continuous way, and we are having due to the fact that we are sitting next to each other, and we hope that we would be able to reach the first and second positions, and we would not disagree who is going to be first and who is going to be second. So now when we talk about the importance of think tanks, particularly when it comes to times of crisis, so there are so many reasons. The first reason is that we used to live as a result of a number of tremors that used to happen every 10 to 15 years. We had 48, 73, 52, and so on and so forth. But now we see an augmented level of the depth of these crises, and also the time between each and every crisis has become very, very short indeed. So we have seen so many historic tremors that we would not have thought that would happen only in 8 years. Particularly that we live in a region where everybody follows, from Moscow, from Washington, from Beijing. Everybody, all those capitals look at this region as a strategic region, a region that has a lot of resources, and each and every of those capitals look at this region with their own calculations. So we live in two regions. So we have the GCC region and the Arab region, which is very, very important, strategically speaking, to these capitals. So we have a number of implicit and explicit kind of strategic levels of importance when it comes to these capitals. So when it comes to the importance, when we talk about the role of think tanks in times of crises, so these think tanks, they give us an in-depth view of the different phenomena, the implicit and the explicit ones that are the kind of a strategic compass of what is happening around us. So this is not a matter of having luxury. We do not live at a time of luxury when we talk about one research paper that we do conduct about this or that topic. No, this is an attempt to excavate into different topics to see the points of intersection between what is regional, what is international, and what is local. And there's a second point that I would like to underline, that we no longer live in an era where we have a separate track between what is political and what is knowledge-based, or what is informational. So, and this leads me to the idea of Michel Foucault talking about these two points. So the compass would give you the opportunity to get to know about the visions ahead of us. And I would like to give you an example about the Heritage Institute in Washington, which was and still is a think tank that gives 70% of the program of both Presidents Trump and other presidents as well. So when we talk about Brookings, for instance, after the Second World War, the Brookings Institute was the one that crystallized the Marshall Plan as a political kind of plan, and this was enabled so many countries to follow. So the role of think tanks is to enable different countries to link the different bricks, the different points together for them to be able to read what is happening. So politics is not something that is only particular to politicians. It is something that requires some enlightenment by the different think tanks. So that is why the role of think tanks is inevitable. It is a strategic necessity, but when we contemplate the role of the different think tanks, we have to say that there are in excess of 8,000 think tanks, and in excess of half of those think tanks, as per the Pennsylvania Civil Society's indicator, are in the northern part of the hemisphere. So this makes us understand that the Arab region is the lowest in terms of the number of think tanks and research centers. We have only 6 or 7 centers. You have 30 seconds only. So for North America, we have 1,058 think tanks, which constitutes 25% of the total number of think tanks. Europe, 26.9. It has 2,219 think tanks. South America, it has 1,023, which constitutes 12%. Asia, 2.2, and the total is 192. Africa, it has 612 think tanks, which constitutes 7.4. And the Arab region, we have 6.1% only, by 507 only think tanks. So when we celebrate that we have such research papers, we have to look also into the position of our think tanks, internationally speaking.
Dr. Shimmeri, during crises and the role of think tanks, Dr. Sharqawi and Dr. Nader they simply think that the roles must be changed during crisis times. Do you agree with them on this? First of all, I would like to welcome everybody in this meeting, and I will thank you and thank the organizers, and I congratulate all the Al Jazeera Center and Brookings Center. First of all, I would like to start where ended Dr. Sharqawi and his pessimism regarding the Arab world and its think tanks compared to what we find in Europe and the United States. I disagree with him in this, and I am in fact optimistic about the think tanks in the Arab world. And in fact, I think somehow we are being too tough with ourselves if we compare ourselves to the Western world in the field of think tanks. The Arab worlds are newly independent. Some think tanks in the world are older than some Arab countries. When Brookings Center was created, there was no independent Arab country. The state girls all got their independence in 1961, 71, and so I think it's not fair to compare ourselves to them. We have more than 161 the think tank in the Gulf region only, and this I think is a good achievement. In Qatar we have more than 20 think tanks. If we take the general context, the context of development of societies, we think we are still in the beginning, and but we are, yes, it is true we are going slow, but there are so many think tanks in Tunisia, in Morocco, in Jordan, who are playing a very good role in decision making, helping decision makers and making public opinions. But to answer your question, Doctor, about the roles and the crisis and the think tanks, I think we have so many restrictions that restrict the kind of the answer. So speaking about the think tanks, what kind of think tanks? When you think about crisis, what kind of crisis to speak? It's economic or political or societal aspects. Also the nature, the environment that is in which these centers work, and the challenges that they face, in a democratic environment are different for the center working in an environment that's not democratic. So there's also those who finance these centers and what they want. And I don't agree with those who think that the think tanks in the democratic world are all in a better position than those in the Arab non-democratic, such as the Arab world. Just as the think tanks in the Arab world face and are under a lot of pressure from the decision makers and authorities, the think tanks in USA and Europe also are facing a lot of pressure from their financiers, those who finance them. I read a report about USA that the money received by think tanks in the West after the Gulf crisis, the finance doubled more than once for the centers. And of course, this finance does not come free of charge. No, this finance comes with imposing their agenda of those who pay the money. And there are also some ideological and intellectual side-taking and impartiality that depends on the political position of that country. How can you, for example, evaluate the role of think tanks of the USA during the Trump and Iran crisis? What about the think tanks about the withdrawal of USA from the nuclear deal? Whether those who are against Iran welcome that decision, those who do not will be disagreeing, or that all depends who is financing these centers, these think tanks. So it's not that they are a white page and we are a black page. No, they have their own pressures on them, just as we have. In the Arab world, we complain that the think tanks are not very effective, but in Europe, Eastern Europe, they complain of a false efficacy or efficiency that is done for some special purposes, electoral purposes, and so I think the pressures and the roles are there on both sides. But if you want to speak in general terms about this issue, we say that think tanks work before the crises by preparing some future and perspective studies, during the crises by collecting of information and guidance to them. And what distinguishes the think tanks compared to advisors of decision makers. Sometimes decision maker just resort to their own their advisor. Every official here has a political, economic, and advisor and security advisor. But the difference is that the think tanks think in a scientific way, and these are collective studies or researches. They are research teams that undertake this job, so they develop a sort of collective vision, not upon persons. It's not only one researcher or two. No, it's usually a research team that analyze the topic from different aspects, from different points of view, and then they develop the suggestions and the different scenarios. Thank you very much. Dr. Nader, there's a challenge, I think. I don't know how you look at it now in the think tanks. Is one of your objectives to that the product of this center should reach the ordinary citizens or public? And if this so, how do you see the challenge with the media and the social media, where there's so much information that is being communicated, so many comments, and so do you deal with these challenge right from the beginning, and how do you deal with it? The issue of information has changed. In the past, one could write a book, but with the development of technology and the media and social media and it's become much rapid, much faster. So the think tanks must follow this and be from more than one point. First of all, using the media. For example, we think that when we have a study or a research, we communicate to decision makers, but also we communicate it to the public, to the media, and because the media will be in touch with the decision makers and might send information according to the topic to the advisors of the decision makers or the politicians. So our role must be thinking about how we have a positive effect And this should be done by being in touch with different kinds of audiences and in different ways. This is the first thing. As then the challenge also with the increase in social media and this increase of the speed of changing of information, there is a possibility or a chance for false news and for fake news to be spread and to make wrong impressions. This makes something difficult for the think tank to face. For example, if there is a false news or a wrong news on a social media platform, our reaction would be slow relatively because we need to analyze this. When we produce any information, we analyze it, we study it, and while we do so, the information would be too old and there's a new one that people are focusing on. So this is a real problem, and that's why the think tanks need to have within their centers or tanks some working groups that are active, that interactive, that have specialists. And thank God we in our center, and I think the other centers also, we have specialized people about media and social media and how to be interactive with their social media. And, but it's important to cope with it in a very fast way. And if you allow me, there's a third point. I know I will be differing with my own selves. At the same time, the role of think tanks are not to be active with every information, with every point. Sometimes the information will go away. So the center or the think tank should take a step backward to wait for better and more accurate information and to give it a longer time to thinking. So it needs to be interactive sometimes about some issues with the media and the social media, but at the same time, this should not be most of the work of the think tank. It should work on a different level. So we need to strike this kind of balance, a balance that is difficult to achieve, but it's very important. Dr. Sharqawi, through the Jazeera Center for the Center of Studies, do you focus on the social media? I know through past 3 years you have very good media presence. You have monthly meetings, and you get. How do you communicate with the social media, and do you interact with them? Let me say something that makes the difference between what is presented by the think tanks and what is presented by the different media channels and press, and even the Google and the social media. I don't think it is an issue of just giving information. No. The information could be just passing by, it could be available, but the think tanks present the deep analyzed information that is a good knowledge about the topic, about the crisis, and all its ramifications that might not be seen by the media people or in the social media. That's say the think tanks go deeper than what the others do. So think tanks create knowledge that could be go in different directions. Direction of the decision maker to make use of this information and to understand the future implications of any decision he takes, decision A, decision B, etc., and which scenario is better. We present to him a sort of roadmap of the future to know how each decision could be affecting a number of events, or the regional or international. And the think tanks also produce knowledge that is useful for the researchers and the university professors, so there's academic aspect also. And there's also the third aspect or dimension, which is dealing with international public opinion. The public that wants to consume this information according to the time and according to their appetite. Some of them read half of the paper, and some of them want to even to copy it and to keep it. As to go back to your question, as for the Jazeera Center for Studies, we have found that there are so many publics or audiences. There is those who are the political elite in the Arab world, in the Arabic language, and also in some of the capitals who are interested in the Gulf studies and Middle East studies, that's diplomats, and some of research centers who focus on the region. And we also found out that we have a big number of the generation of university researchers who benefit from our papers. And also there is on the level of different social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, etc. There is a public that shows us that we are trying to be inclusive with all of them. Let's say we present something to the political elite, to the academic professors and students, and the social media. So, briefly speaking, I don't want to exclude Brookings and other centers. What we present as research centers creates knowledge and also fills what was said by Habermas, the German, it fills the public sphere. That's to say, this knowledge becomes part of a general discourse, political discourse or intellectual one. Let's say the think tanks production is consumed on several stages and becomes the introduction, the beginning of understanding the crisis or the issues. And hence it becomes an issue of time and space competition. Let's say the faster you are in presenting your research in the crisis, the faster you become one of the main sources or reference points, and others will copy from you. And this will like something that grows. So it's early. It's important to go into the field early and to direct the elite and the academic.
Dr. Ashimari, the GCC representatives or audience is very much present when it comes to social media as a GCC center. Do you think about how to access this audience, how to present your products, the products of your center or any other center to this particular audience, or you only coordinate with decision makers, with politicians, and such an audience is not the kind of audience that you coordinate with or communicate with? No, we do communicate with them more than we do with politicians. I think we have two trackways. The one which is paying heed to the public opinion, and the second one paying heed to politicians. The mistakes committed by centers, think tanks, particularly the ones that are sponsored by universities, they pay more heed to politicians more than to public opinions. And sometimes public opinion trackways can be the entry point to politicians. In Ibn Khaldun Center, we do hold a number of events about social media, the impact of social media, and how we can analyze the anthropology and the different matters when it comes to this particular audience. I would like to underline the point that was underlined by Dr. Shankawi. We do benefit from different studies that are being carried out by different centers, such as Al Jazeera Center for Studies. These are references for our students, particularly when it comes to topical matters. Particularly when it comes to the GCC crisis, our students faced a dilemma. They had a topical incident or event, which was the GCC crisis, and they did not have many references to lean on, so they relied on those papers that have been written by different think tanks, such as the Strategic Center for Studies and also Al Jazeera Center for Studies. These outputs are very important indeed for our students. No, we do not sideline the GCC audience. No, we do pay heed to this audience because it is very important indeed. So we have so many issues that are being discussed on Twitter. They are impact. We have laws, legislations that are stopped, cancelled as a result of the impetus that we do witness in the different interactions on Twitter. For instance, I talk now about Qatar. So Twitter forms a lot of the public opinion in the state of Qatar. So if we would like to play a role in the share of public opinion formation, we have to pay heed to Twitter. So before we give the floor to Dr. Sharqawi, we would like to give the floor to some of our guests with us here in the hall. So, sir, yes, go ahead. Microphone, please. So please, if you can introduce yourself, Bilal Sabir. I have a question, please, with regard to the translation. Think tanks, you have translated it, Markaz Abhath. So Markaz Abhath is a generic term, so it does not differentiate between academic centers for research and think tanks that are different, that are centers that propose policies. So this is the first point. So is there anything that has been lost in translation? Anything that had not been included in the way you translated the title of this seminar? So the second point that I would like to talk about, if you allow me, if think tanks propose policies as part of their role, so the nature of the community is also very important. In democratic communities, decisions are undertaken and policies are being devised based on the advocacy of the people, what the people want. So when Trump was elected, some of the think tanks helped him devise those policies. Had it been another candidate who won the elections, maybe some other think tanks would have played a role in the formation of the policies of that president that made it to office. So when we talk about think tanks, and if we talk only about some particular options, so it is not a matter of knowledge or disseminating knowledge. I think these think tanks, they propose policies, they support those policies based on the different trends that exist in the community. So this is part of the democratic kind of way of making the audience participate in the decision making. So this is not only one question, so these are a number of questions that you have posed. So Doctor, I would like to start with you if you'd like to answer this question. When it comes to the translation, yes, this is true. As you can see, yes, we have think tanks. These are intellectual centers or opinion centers. This is how we translate them. This is the literal translation of the word Markaz Fikr, which means an intellectual center in Arabic. So this is a think tank, and we have to call them maybe intellectual and research centers. So these are different from advocacy centers or anything similar to that. So in our reports, we call them intellectual and research centers, which means think tanks. This is in Arabic. So I do not think that there is any consensus when it comes to how to translate the word think tank into Arabic. You posed the question, you talked about the dilemma of lost in translation, and you do not want to accept the translation of think tank as being a research center. So when we talk about think tank, it means that it is a reservoir of thought. So this is the literal translation of the word. So there are two translations to think tanks, which is research center, which means a number of people, qualified people, who take it incumbent on themselves to think about certain matters, to present a number of proposals that are dedicated to politicians and to decision makers, which becomes part of public knowledge. The second option, and there are some persons in Doha and other capitals who think that they do not represent research centers, but they represent intellectual centers. So thinking about themselves as being a team or a number of philosophers who think about certain matters, who contemplate certain philosophical matters, and we are not doing that in our research centers. So I think my friend and my neighbor here agrees with me. I think we do come up with pragmatic, practical visions in terms of how to propose certain alternatives. And when Pennsylvania University comes and talks about think tanks, it talks about all institutions, research institutions. And I would like to clarify a point. Not all research centers or reservoirs of thoughts between brackets. We have so many of those centers that are being emulated by other parts of the world. There are some research centers that want to stay independent, and there are some research centers that are pro-Democratic Party, and some others that are pro-Republican Party. So we have the Progress Liberal Center that is pro the Democratic political party, and we have some corporations such as Rand Corporation, which is very much close to the Department of Defense in the US. And we have something which is very new. We have some multinational companies that do develop certain research centers in order to crystallize a certain kind of knowledge. I'm not saying that all this is innocent, no, but each research center works in keeping with its own convictions and the pledges it made when it was established. But you have the option to have a look at the different works that are being produced by the different think tanks or research papers and research centers, and choose what is useful for you.
We'll go back to the audience now. Hazem Lutfi, a diplomat in the Syrian embassy in Doha. I thank all the panelists. I had a question about the sources of finance of these think tanks. To my knowledge, most of these research centers are financed by the governments and the different political parties, and this, of course, does this affect their work or their dependency? The other point, Dr. Qabbani and the other doctor said they could be a bridge between researchers and the think tank and one side and the decision makers on the other side. Are there any think tanks that work in a reversed way, that they are communication center between the decision makers and the society to affect the public opinion? That's to say, they would begin with the decision makers to have some effects on the public opinion depending on some researchers. Thank you very much. I thank all the panelists. I thank their professionalism that make me almost believe what they say. In fact, the research centers or think tanks, Mr. Sharqawi said talk about international, and the other Stanaif spoke about Qatar. I have the right to speak about my country. If we look into the finance that was referred to by Dr. Hazem, in Egypt has 1% of the GDP is for the research. That's 60 billion, but what was really done was only 60 million. And there is the brain drain. That's to say, more than 1,500 physicians went out of the country. So the criteria of competency and knowledge are they applied in these centers? In our centers have somebody called Adi Afta who cures cancer by using some sort of kufta. And thank you, Dr. Naif. Will you answer the question about the finance and its effects on the think tanks? I don't know if I will believe, if I tell you, if I don't know, but in the Khaldun Center, we are attached to the University of Qatar. Consequently, we are we are financed by the University of Qatar. The whole institution, in an academic way, is not under pressure to adopt any project. Honestly speaking, I'm in this university class since 2005. I never saw anything imposed on us. Maybe some of our projects might be rejected, but nothing has ever been imposed on us. Nobody ever asked us to organize a conference about that. We sometimes receive some suggestions that we can reject or accept. Maybe if we're an independent center outside the university, attached to the Ministry of Defense or the Interior or any other ministry, maybe there would be some agenda imposed on us. But being part of the University of Qatar, it makes us go and not subjected to any kind of pressure on it. Our research agenda is something that is adopted by our Khaldun Center without the effects of any other institution. This is the reality, and I told you, the reason is that we are attached to the university. Had we been independent, maybe it would be different, yeah. The question was, what I meant, I was not thinking about your center, but the idea of finance and it's affecting the work of the think tanks. This is important, don't you agree? Yes, of course, important, but the idea is not everyone who finance imposes what he wants. Sometimes you finance me to hear what you want or do what you should know. There's a difference between the two. As a Ministry of Foreign Affairs, do you finance me to tell you, give you information about their allies? You need real information to build your position upon, and not to hear something that is that makes you happy. No. Some finance or some donors sometimes do only want to benefit from the research they ask for. So Sharqawi, the finance and about the communication between the decision makers and the public opinion. شو نقول ممول؟
funders.
And no think tank, where no matter whether the West and the East, can live on donations coming from the sky. So finance is important. But more than that, the criteria or indicator of Pennsylvania University considers the financing factor as one of the 20 conditions for these centers in the world. Mostly, there's a sort of theory of conspiracy theory that people think of, that those who finance the center impose what they want. No, I don't agree with this. Realistic speaking, I have dealt with different think tanks in the USA and Europe and now in the Gulf. Mostly, there is an annual financing and then funding, and then the center I speak to my own personal experience in that center, Jazeera Center for Studies. We have a number of researchers, the Arabic unit and the English unit, and there's a director or manager of research, and there's the director of the center, of course. What happens that we sit together every two or 3 weeks to discuss the different important issues and also different suggestions. Thus, these sessions are a way to collective thinking between the research teams, and I never saw or heard that anybody was imposed on us because of the finance or some higher authority imposed anything on us. In fact, I am proud that I say proudly that we have complete freedom or intellectual freedom, we as researchers, and I think this exists also in other centers. Let's say the professionalism of research and the researchers' attachment to this, and when they adopt any or they make any study or paper, this is the real strategy in research. I don't think there's any nuances, hidden nuances about the finance or the controlling of, as if we are living at the Soviet Union era. No, we must correct this, and if you have a finance from somebody, you can increase your capability in research, and you are damned that the public is much more clever and much more knowledgeable of what we are presenting to them. Are you giving them a coherent content according to good research methodologies, or are you just insinuating some ideas? So there is the academic presentation and there is the ideological presentation, and I think things are, we live at a time of transparency. One point before I close up, sometimes the knowledge has some additional value. What is presented by think tanks is something very important, what is an important aspect of international relations about soft power and intelligent power. And this is what makes any country or any entity capable of standing by themselves and have a good effect. Coming back to the question, I don't think there are think tanks that are created by politicians to they control them. But we can say that there is a problematic relationship. The researcher, just as a media man, cannot accept from a politician any ideas imposed on him, and also the politician usually are very careful in dealing with the researchers, but the politician sometimes can go to a think tank on off the record. For example, Chatham House in London has created the off the record of private talk in which a politician can speak publicly about things that in the meeting without not in front of any cameras. So this increases the circle of the knowledge for the researchers, but it does not reach neither pathological exploitation or to try to be more clever than them, than the researchers who know better what are the limits of knowledge and what is academic, what is politics and management of crisis.
Thank you very much. I would like to agree here with Dr. Muhammad. There is a difference between funding and being independent. So think tanks do not necessarily deal with the funders in such a way whereby it gives the funders what they want. But I have an additional point to what Mr. Ahmed had said. The responsibility of research centers and think tanks, they should have their own internal procedures, and they have to make sure that there is no relationship between the funding and the outcomes of research. If such kind of measures are weak, there might be a problem, and we oftentimes hear about these problems in certain think tanks or even scientific research centers and universities as well. We do hear that there are some outcomes of research concerning, for instance, the nutritional value of eggs, for instance, and this is due to the fact that there are some funders that have funded a particular research because they wanted to reach a certain outcome. So there might be some shortcomings here, some problems, but the think tanks that are respectful would put restrictions, would put measures as to the kind of research that is being carried out. So generally speaking, research centers, think tanks, they are either independent or university think tanks, and they communicate with the general or public opinion and also politicians. So it is difficult to have this relationship the other way around, from the politicians to the think tanks. So the main trait that impacts such a relationship is the kind of country where these think tanks exist. So do countries allow discussions to take place? So the state of Qatar, for instance, the state of Qatar has research centers, think tanks that can carry out analyses, research with transparency and can come up with different opinions vis-a-vis the same matter. But there are some other countries, security repressive kind of countries. We can mention some of those countries. In those countries, the think tanks, either public or private or independent, are forced to reach the same outcome, the same particular outcome. So at the end of the day, you can have some research centers that are being used for certain kinds of propaganda. But when we look into repressive countries that would guide those research centers to carry out certain particular research, but we are part of the first category of countries where research centers are given the freedom to carry out their own research the way they want. So talking about the standards of qualification, and the speaker talked about Egypt, and he talked about there are some research centers that are not up to the standard required. I think that the main qualifications that researchers should enjoy in a successful or promising think tank, these qualifications entail that those researchers should have knowledge when it comes to research methodology, research rules, and also to respect a number of ethical requirements, and also to be researchers that are professionals and not only amateurs. And here, when we look into the Pennsylvania Index, we do see that there are 20 conditions or criteria that the methodology of research should respect. So, personally speaking, I do not think that we should have persons who are an authority in a particular theme or topic for him or her to be able to carry out research. No, we have to have the ability to see the different intersections that are particular to a certain topic. We should start from an interdisciplinary kind of perspective and not start from a certain specific kind of specialization, a very narrow kind of knowledge. No, we should have the ability to talk about topical issues. We can talk about sociology, economy, and talk about the exchange rate and so on and so forth. All these matters are interrelated and we should not ignore them. So that is why researchers should have an expanded kind of view, and should be some vitality whereby you can have different people as part of your research team for them to be able to complement with each other, because it is a collective effort more than an individual effort. When it comes to Egypt, I think that the rating of Pennsylvania, I think that Al-Ahram Center for Research has been rated in an advanced position. So Dr. Naif would like to go to the third point, effectiveness, the effectiveness of these think tanks. How can these think tanks become much more effective, particularly when they come to reach a large number of audience?
I don't want to give a very long answer, not to take the time of the audience. But if the think tanks want to be effective, they must focus on what beneficiaries are interested in, whether decision makers or the public opinion. The public opinion has issues that are important for them, and so we must give them that. And also, the decision makers have issues that are important for them. So if the papers we prepare or the studies are the academic ones, are usually from universities, and think tanks of university are usually have two qualities. One, that they are theoretical. Second, they are very long. And decision makers don't want either one, neither theoretical nor too long. He wants them to be brief, and that the analysis, what is the problem and what are the solutions that proposed. And I think it's very important to be precise, to be adequate. Adequacy in writing the scenarios gives the center, think tanks credibilities. Today, when the Iranians began, I just spoke of Iran, things went down. I forgot, the Iranians made me forget what I was saying. So about the crisis of Iran, beginning of targeting tankers and then drones, the think tanks, did they really expected what will come, what will be after that? Will there be a war? Will there be targeting personality? Will be a toppling for the regime? How adequate and correct were the papers or the research that were made at that time? So the think tanks must contribute in a good way that makes in a way that they gain the credibility within the with the officials and the decision makers. So if what they write are imaginary things, it's normal that the decision maker will not support these centers. On the other side, especially the centers that work in the national university, they need to be in service of the society, not only the decision makers. Those who are not some other centers, but the centers here in the Gulf states, we have big transformations on the religious awareness, economic one, the consumerism. So all these are issues that are important for the public opinion. And if you don't discuss them, it's normal that neither the public opinion nor the decision maker will think that we are credible. Question, is it true that on the level of the regimes or decision makers or the public, is there a bigger trust in the Western think tanks than those in the Middle East and the Arab world? And if so, why? I don't want to be against the Arab decision makers and say that maybe they might listen to an advice coming from a think tank from Washington, London, more than listening to someone from his own country. I think we are at the stage that we strategically speaking, we must believe in our own capabilities. And I think the time of political knowledge, guardianship has gone away. I think we are now, this is something that is going away and vanishing. And now with Trump's in power, we found that they are neither moral nor security, American guardianship or security for the Gulf states. So if the Gulf states and the other Middle East countries want to be independent, I think this present situation, and here I disagree with my colleague on my right, that we must not wait too long, historically speaking, until the end of the first century, so that until we have enough strength on the level of research. No, we are now going through a strategic stage or period that imposes a lot of challenges, and consequently this region needs to stand up, speak for itself, and look for solution for its problems, and to get out of this guardianship of the West, because this guardianship is in service of their own interest. Question: what should the think tanks do to be able to convince their public and their decision makers? I think the present thing now is to have two things at the same time. The first thing is to present some strategic ideas that are short and concise, in analyzing the problems and suggesting scenarios. And I know that the politicians want a page or two, but we should not minimize the intellectual effort in 1 or 2 pages. No, we need to elaborate a full paper, and from which the politician takes what the parts that he wants, and the academic person will takes what he wants from them. Just as we are in the age of crises, we need to in our center think tank, we need to develop regional political strategic visions in dealing with the Iran crisis and the Qatari crisis. And I think now we have a fatality that is a new one. The continuous crises, the continuous earthquakes that we are having, as if every week we live in another world, as if the world has been toppled upside down. So I think at this time, especially the think tanks in the Gulf and the Middle East need to look into the future. That's to say, they must present some ideas and visions that facilitate for the public and for the political opinion to understand what's coming, what are the potential of the future. So to say, a sort of making guesses about the future, that is to present some scenarios and some deep knowledge about the future. And here I would like to salute what was begun by Manjari when he told the Arab world that they should look into the future studies, and I think the think tanks now have the responsibility of dealing with the scenarios of the present day and the future ones. Before we go to the question of effectiveness, in the Arab world, do we have think tanks that can see the future and know what's going on amid all the skies that we are living in? No, I don't think so. It's very difficult to predict what will be in the future 100%. But there are some think tanks that do make some experiences to understand what will be the future in a year or 2 years from now. For example, last year in Doha Forum 2018, we had brought in a number of researchers from different think tanks, and we had a sort of an exercise, small exercise, for less than 1 hour to discuss what are their future vision for the next year. One of the things that were said then was the financial crisis in Lebanon, which did take place, the issue of the political transition in Algeria, and this did take place. So, and many other predictions that were made that were turned out to be true. but there was special methodology that was adopted then of bringing in different ideas and different points of view. We come back to the idea that yes, it is possible, but we must have collective ideas to discuss that, not individual ideas. We need collective ideas that represent different visions. But in addition to that, I'll come back to the first topic, which is it's not enough to say to the decision maker or to the public that be careful, there might be a crisis, a financial crisis coming to Lebanon. But we should also, what should be done? What measures should be taken? How one can avoid such a crisis? Unfortunately, one of the weak points of our research centers, in not only the Arab world in the days, but also in the world, that usually the centers or think tanks say that this is an important topic, and they might present some political recommendations, but they don't take the last step, which is how to implement these political recommendations. They don't take that into consideration. So it is important. This predicting the future is important, but it should be related also to the question what to be done. And this, of course, brings us to the issue of effectiveness.
We have less than 10 minutes. Maybe we can take some more questions from the audience. Assalamu alaikum. Abid from the Center for Educational Studies. This is not to do with the strategic studies. So we have gone through so many crises in the GCC. So what is the role of research centers when it comes to training, educating, helping our students through the Ministry of Education and higher education? Are there any activities whereby such centers would raise awareness, would help those students communicate with them? Do these centers carry out some research on the ground to know what is happening on the ground for those centers to be able to get sources of information, get their information from its sources, from the community, from the ground? I would like to thank the BDC, the Brookings Doha Center, because all the messages that Brookings sends them to their followers. Most of their messages are in the English language. It is very rarely when we see messages sent to us in Arabic. So what is the reason why they are not sending us messages in Arabic? So I'd like to take perhaps the last question to the lady here, please. So we have 5 minutes left. The lady at the back, Reem Al-Harami. May the peace of God be upon you. Reem Al-Harami, I have a question that I would like to pose. I have read a great deal that there is a gap between academic articles that are published in academic journals and the public sphere. So, for instance, 82% of published articles in humanities, they have not been cited, have never been cited, and the average number of readers is 10. So I think that there is a gap between what academics published in academic journals and what the public receives or what the public has access to, because so many people cannot have access to these journals because they are paid journals. So I think that there is a gap between the public sphere and these academic journals, because there is a great deal of knowledge that is published and unfortunately it is not read and it is not going to be read. So how can we bridge this gap, this knowledge gap? So the lady, and this is going to be the lady at the back, and this is going to be the last question to be posed. طاب مساؤكم. أحد المتحدثين أشار وقال إن هناك الكثير من مراكز الأبحاث في أوروبا وأمريكا وإفريقيا، لكن العدد هو قليل جدا فيما يخص هذه المنطقة من العالم. وأنا كباحثة تابعت توجهات المتعلقة بالجندر عندما يتعلق الأمر بجمع البيانات الأولية. عندما أتابع مواقع إلكترونية مختلفة أريد أن أحصل فيها على إحصائيات لها علاقة بالتجارة أو ربما الجوانب الديمغرافية أو الاقتصادية أو ما إلى ذلك. الدول مثل أوروبا وأمريكا وأفريقيا لديها معلومات محدثة تصل إلى 2019 و2020، لكن بعض الدول في المنطقة معلوماتها المحدثة تصل فقط إلى 2014 أو حتى أقل. هل تعتقدون أو لا تعتقدون أن المراكز الأبحاث في هذه المنطقة أنها انتقائية فيما يخص الأبحاث التي تقومون بها؟ إذن we have only 5 minutes left and we would like to talk about the role of research centers and educational matters. So the first question that was posed, the role of think tanks when it comes to أعطيته 5 دقائق. طب خليه يحكي.
I will, in the same context, yes, sometimes lately, in fact, we had a course about international relations for the public in the Qatari society, and there were connections with some of students of secondary school about research topics. About the question, if I understood the question, yes, I say that we do suffer in Qatar, that the fact that usually all the government institutions are very stingy in giving information, and they do not cooperate with us. I'm talking here about the social level, about the family, about children. There's a big problem in obtaining information for these centers, and as I saw, there is no freedom of exchange of information in some institutions we have. What was said by Mr. Harami about difficulty of obtaining scientific journals, I think this is a problem in the West. But here, in Qatar, all the academic journals are available for anyone. But the fact that these journals do not reach the public, yes, this is logical, because these journals are not targeting the public. Their target are the elite, the academic elite and the elite in the society. So there is a problem at the level of knowledge itself that is there. Consequently, I don't think there's a problem that the journals are not available to the public. It's not for them. About the gap, briefly, I think we, in the last 20 years, we began establishing, creating Arab think tanks, whether in the Gulf or the Maghreb. There are some financing or funding, and I think here it's taking place. I agree that this is not only that there is lack of information, the boycotts and the different ministries and government institutions usually do not want or accept to hand over information because of security reasons. If you send a team of researchers who want to make a sort of survey, the institution bring in all their intelligence officers and police. The problem is that right now there is a lot of concern of fear of spread of knowledge. Governments want to keep the information for themselves, as if we want to know their latest secrets of their weaponry. No, this is not what the researchers want. There's a real conflict here. But the think tanks or the research centers should not give up that the effort of finding other ways to turn around these difficulties. So if we cannot be on the field, I think the social media would give you some flexibility. That's to say, if you do not cannot make a survey and cannot in a scientific way, you can do that by the social media. The negative effects on the think tanks because of this idea of information and going to the street for making surveys. The common thing between how the think tanks work and how should overcome these challenges is that it's important to be innovative and just you are innovative in knowledge, you should also be innovative in the way you obtain the information, and this is an open battle, and this is part of the nature of scientific research. About the idea in your center, publishing in Arabic or English, and do you have anything else to add? As for the publications of our center, all the publications and all our papers we have, or those about policies, and we are to publish them in both languages, English and Arabic, at the same time. We as our center. We are also linked with the Brookings Center in Washington. If the Brookings publish a paper about the Middle East, we send we send them to different parties or centers, and usually they are in English language. Sometimes they might be translated, but not necessarily. So anything we publish is in two languages at the same time, but we usually also spread the information about the Middle East, that information that's published by Brookings in Washington in English language. As for the information, I agree with my colleague that it's important what Dr. Muhammad said, that there's small difference. I was a university professor and I also worked in a research center. There are two differences. In the research center, it's very important to publish papers that are readable. So we follow the number of readers, the number of hits on the internet, and the readings of views. So all our papers are well read, but the numbers, how many read them? This is part of our work. So we need to have readers, otherwise not. As for the academic papers, it is important of course to As for the academic papers, sometimes they focus on very precise information. If it's not definitely 100% sure, it would not be published. And we also focus on the usage, or how making. So if we want to deliver information, we use the best way we can deliver this information once we are sure of it. And you should also refer that this is the source of this information. It is not from the state or government. And also, if it is useful in communicating the idea, it will be used. Thank you very much, Dr. Nader from Brookings Doha, and also thank Dr. Muhammad Sharqawi, first researcher at Jazeera Center for Studies, and thank you, Dr. Naid bin Nahar Shumari, Director of Khaldun Center, University of Qatar. I thank all the participants here, and I'm sorry that you could not take all the questions of the public. I'm sorry we are short of time, ran out of time, and we need to go with the time available. Thank you very much, and let's thank our viewers at Al Jazeera in Russia. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum. Goodbye.
Thanks for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe for more videos from Brookings.